I want to take a second here and thank the sponsors of the podcast. I want to thank GoHunt.com, my friend Cody Nelson, the glassing guru. He's the optics manager at GoHunt.com Gear Shop. If you have any optical needs at all, give Cody a call directly at 702-847-8747. You can also send him an email at optics@gohunt.com. You can also text him at 602-399-3699. I want to thank Go Hunt for their sponsorship. Also remind you guys we're in application season. The Go Hunt Insider is the best Western hunting resource tool out there. It's got the best draw odds and harvest statistics available. You can go to gohunt.com/jscott. Just by signing up, you're going to get a $50 Go Hunt Gear Shop gift card. I want to thank gohunt.com. I also want to thank Kuiu. That's Kuiu. Kuiu Ultralight Hunting, Kuiu.com. Kuiu is the gear that I wear on all of my hunts. Phonescope.com, I want to thank them. Use the JScott20 promo code. You're going to get a 10% discount on all orders. OnXMaps.com, use the JScott20 promo code. You're going to get a 20% discount on all orders at OnX Maps. And then ApexMunition.com. Apex Ammunition, it's the home of the TSS, the Tungsten Super Shot. That is the shotgun shells that I'm going to be using on my upcoming turkey hunts. Go to apexmunition.com to find out more. Guys, let's get back to the episode.
What's up, Jay?
Jim, how you doing, buddy?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm going to merge you over with Chris, and we'll just dive right into whatever questions you've got.
Well, I hope I got enough questions. You might have to help guide it a little bit.
That's all right. We've got a pile to go through, so even if you got one or two, it's fine.
Perfect.
Okay, hang on. Okay, Chris, we've got Jim here, my buddy from Colorado. He is actually out in Texas, headed to go turkey hunting, and he had some questions. Jim, what do you got?
Well, I'm pretty new to the turkey game, as you know. My first question, I was out this morning just doing some scouting, and this is real elementary, but do toms yelp and cluck, or do they just gobble?
So toms, yes, can yelp and cluck and make other hen-type sounds for sure. But more than likely in Texas, I would think that most of what you're going to be hearing is gobblers gobbling. But certainly they can cluck and they can basically make all of the sounds. It's going to sound a little deeper. It's not going to sound quite as sweet. If you heard turkeys but didn't hear gobbling, I would venture to maybe say they should be gobbling. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, it would not surprise me that they should be gobbling. However, and the other thing too, keep in mind, oftentimes if you have groups of jakes will yelp and cluck and they'll do all the same quote unquote, what people say hen sounds, but they're just the basic vocalizations, like Jay said, that they will absolutely do all those sounds. But if you are looking at birds strutting or they're up on a limb strutting, you're not hearing any gobbles, but you hear a whole bunch of yelps and clucks and everything else, you might be hearing those jakes.
Did you see them, Jim?
Yeah, I saw hens and toms kind of in different areas. I mean, I got in between them finally when I left my blind. And I guess that was my next question is, how do you know when to bail on your blind and go after them versus, holding tight?
Well, I think yeah, that's the $100 question. But first, I would ask: did you actually have them gobbling? You heard birds gobbling this morning, and then you were in your blind, and then you had kind of a group separate, and then you didn't. You said, "Well, shoot, now what do I do?" Is that kind of what happened?
Well, I was in the blind. I had a couple decoys in front of me, and I did hear them gobbling. And then, that's a whole nother question I have is how, I'm used to elk hunting and giving it some time, for them to come in after your last call. How long, do you wait on them? And so I waited an hour without hearing much more action, but then I could sound like they were gobbling further away from me. So that's when I got out of the blind. and started, kind of moving after them. And that's
So,
when I finally caught up to them.
yeah, so I mean, one of the things you hear about is, well, make a few calls and then wait, and they should come to you. And yes, I agree that that can work. But a lot of times, and I'll let Chris kind of go into this, if you're not actually kind of in a conversation with them, they're going to lose interest really fast. Now you're hunting in Texas, so you're dealing with Rios. And I would say Rios and Merriams, they have a little bit different level of intensity or how they want to engage in a conversation, but they can lose interest very, very quickly. So I think getting out of the blind and repositioning on the birds is a lot of times a good thing, but you also, in my mind, have to kind of figure out which direction they are going, and you almost want to loop all the way around them and get in front of them, because I have found it's very difficult to follow birds. One, they're going to see you. Two, it's hard to have birds retrace their steps and come back to you. Typically, they're on a route somewhere. They're going to a strut zone, they're going to a feeding area, they're going to water, they're going somewhere. So just like elk, it's hard to follow elk into dark timber, or it's hard to
Right.
follow elk through pinyon juniper. You almost want to get out to the side of them and parallel them, figure out where they're going. And it may be a function of wherever they're going, they're going to spend quite a bit of time there. You just got to get kind of out in front of them and then work your way back into them. The hard part with turkeys, even more than elk, is their eyesight is way better, and it's very hard to move on turkeys. The ones you moved in on, did they end up seeing you?
Well, the hen did, because I just had to basically forfeit myself to her in order to get to where the toms were.
And then did you make it to the toms, or what happened?
Yeah, I made it to him, and he was going in a favorable direction, and that's when I actually thought I was going to be like in a perfect spot to cut him off. So I quickly put my decoys out there and waited on them, and it just kind of fizzled out. Like, I lost track of them, and yeah, it just all kind of fizzled out.
Chris, what do you got?
Well, I think the best thing the one thing that you said there was right on the money is the birds are going to be doing something. They're going somewhere, and they have a loop. They have a reason of where they're going. So, and with Rios, it's not uncommon for them to roost in one spot, slide down, start heading to a feeding spot, and then go to a different spot, maybe get water, and then go to a different spot for their midday loafing area, and then start to work their way back to the roost. And so they have this cycle of movement on the landscape. And so, especially now where we are still kind of in that, and I imagine Texas being the same way, the birds are still in a kind of an early pattern. So they're going to be grouped up a little bit more, and you might end up having a lot of those gobblers that are just kind of, they still might be multiple gobblers in a group, and they might be still locked down, generally speaking, with a particular group of hens and not wanting to go and venture off in crews on their own. So the question is, that your question was, is how do you know when you just bail on your blind and go follow them versus staying put? And I think, Jay, what you said is important. You need to try to figure out what their pattern is, what their loop is. If you are set up with your ground blind in that loop that they want to be in, especially if your ground blind is in a place where they generally like to hang out and loaf for the day, then sometimes the best thing you can do is, because of the potential of getting busted by being seen while you're moving or whatever, sometimes I will just absolutely stay put in that ground blind. I might have 2, 3, 5, 6 or more hours of just nothingness, and then all of a sudden here they come, because this is where they want to spend the rest of the day. And now I'm literally in ground zero of where those birds want to be. However, if your setup is outside of that loop, go chase them, because they might not be there until literally, most states that I know of, that, in the evening, if you can hunt until dark, it's, sunset. Well, they may not fly up until after sunset. So sometimes if you're outside that loop, you've got no choice but to pick up and just go and follow them. So make sure. How many days have you been hunting so far down there?
2.
Okay. Have they had a consistent pattern that you've been able to see so far?
In the 2 mornings, yes, I've seen them in the same spot, but I haven't been able to see exactly where they're going. One time I got busted, and the second time, like I said, it just kind of fizzled out, and I couldn't tell where he was going. There was 2 gobblers working together.
Were they moving off in the same general direction both days?
Yeah, kind of heading back down towards like this little creek bottom.
Okay. Then tomorrow, maybe the best bet for you this afternoon is to go over, where they were roosted, and then go a couple hundred yards away, maybe either if you can figure out where they're flying out, that's awesome. But if you can't, go a couple hundred yards in the direction in that they were headed. You don't have to have it perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. But as long as, like Jay said, if you can get in front of them, even if you're left or right of their actual path, but you're in that general vicinity, it's a lot easier to get them. It's a lot easier to pull them left or right, so they just kind of veer off to the left and come into your setup, than it is to pull them 180 degrees away. So if you can figure out for tomorrow morning where you want your ground blind, that may be your best play for this afternoon. But yes, if you know that you're in that loop or in that area where they seem to be spending the bulk of the middle part of the day, sometimes just sitting quiet, you can sit in quiet, or you can just call, but staying put in that blind for a few hours can pay dividends. But you've got to be in that zone. You've got to be where the turkeys want to be until we're talking later in the season when you have gobblers out cruising by themselves. But right now, I think you're going to really need your best bet is to figure out what their pattern is and then get your ground blind and your setup in front of them or where they generally want to be.
Jim, are you going to a different property now or going back to hunt the same one?
No, I'm going to a different property tonight, and I'll hunt that tonight and tomorrow morning. That's going to be much further south. And then, so season doesn't actually open up until April 1st up in central Texas where we're staying.
Okay.
So that's why I've been pretty much scouting the last 2 days, trying to figure them out. And then, so I'll be heading back there tomorrow afternoon to central Texas, and I'm going down south today where the season's open to hunt a friend's ranch.
Okay, so
Gotcha.
one thing I might add, when you go back to that property, do you have a pretty good sense of the trees that those gobblers were roosted in?
No, I haven't figured that out yet. I mean, I didn't even know how to. I mean, from what I read, it looks like you got to find. If you're not actually seeing them in the tree, you got to look for their droppings.
Well, did you hear them?
Right?
Did you hear them before light this morning? Did you hear where they were gobbling?
No, I didn't hear them gobbling. And I was out at about 6:30, which is about a half hour before daylight, and didn't hear them gobbling actually until it was probably 7:30.
Is there a chance that those birds? Is there a chance that those birds are actually not roosting on the property and they're roosting somewhere else, and you heard them because then they came on the property, or does the property owner say that they live right there?
It's a pretty big property. He's got 180 acres, so it's just a matter, I think, of where I was set up in the morning that I didn't hear them.
One thing I would say, and Chris, you can weigh in, is Jim, if you had a pretty good sense this morning of where those gobblers, was there one, how many gobblers?
2.
Okay. Were they kind of...
There's actually 2 different groups, but the 2 that I was on and the 2 I saw were they
kind of in the same area? In other words, do you now have an epicenter, if you will, of if you were just going to go right back where they liked to be, where you saw them, they looked content, would that be where you are going to start?
Yeah, exactly. That's where I would try and be set up the next morning.
Okay. And can can you tell where they're watering? Is it dry down there, or is it wet, or what's the story?
No, they got a lot of choices for water. There's a couple ponds. There's a creek bottom.
Okay. Where does
You know,
the
it's like a
landowner say that does the landowner have any idea where the birds are actually sleeping and roosting, and where he would say, I hear them at dark here and I hear them at when the sun is coming up here?
no. He's not a hunter, unfortunately, but I do have some trail camera pictures from the evening. So like, there's, think of like he's grazing cattle in there, and so he's got some good open fields, a couple pastures, and then there's a creek bottom. So I've seen them in the evening, kind of closer to the creek bottom, and there's some beautiful big old trees in there. So I'm sure that's where they're roosting, is somewhere along the creek. And then heading up into the field, that's where I've been seeing them, is kind of at the top of this one field, by 8 a.m. or so.
Chris, bingo went off in my head. If he's got a field where he's been seeing them, if it were me and you weigh in on this, I would probably go set my blind and set my decoys where I think they want to go, regardless of where they're roosting, because that is a variable that it's not a given, because you've only seen them there one time. But if you've seen them there multiple times,
Twice.
Twice, I would go set there and wait for them. And depending on if you have pretty good decoys, what you're using, I would go set up, get the ground blind where if it's possible to kind of get it kind of hidden, and then go sit and just wait. What would you do, Chris?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You need to be where they want to be. Unless you are an exceptional caller, and I mean just absolute exceptional caller, and you want to get into a battle of calling the entire flock to you. No, I think, especially given it's early, given that they're still clocked up, absolutely get out where you've seen them, where you think they want to be, and just stay put and evaluate. Your scouting now is important. The biggest thing that you can do is figure out, where do they want to go? Where are they going? Where are you seeing them? Where are they moving? You want to make sure your setup come opening day is in the path of where they want to be.
Yep, love it.
And then Jim,
I haven't seen them flocked up either. This is like, I've been seeing just like ones and twos.
Gobblers together, or a gobbler with the hen?
Two gobblers. Like the one group, I've seen them twice now, 2 mornings, 2 gobblers together, and then the hens I'm seeing are just singles.
Interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I do know Texas starts way earlier than the rest of, like out here. It's very possible that they're kind of already broke up, but I would be shocked that Chris, I'm surprised that he's not seeing a wagon train, of hens with a gobbler following behind.
Exactly.
But I still go back to, you've got to go with what you know, and if you've seen them in the same spot twice, that's where I would start. And then on the new property you're going to today, not going to a property completely fresh, is your friend going to be able to be there and kind of show you around, or are you going completely blind?
Nope. I'm going to have a guy with me that they've had some good success already this year, so he's got it kind of dialed in. So that's why I'm excited to do that, to kind of learn the ropes a little bit from the behavior and see how he reacts.
Right.
So.
Do you have a coyote howler with you, or do you have an elk diaphragm that you can make a coyote, howl with?
I just have I'm kind of ill prepared. I have a couple diaphragm calls with me. I think they sound pretty decent, but
I guess my point is, if you
trying to get them to shock gobble.
Yeah, if you howl like a coyote when it's dark, right after they fly up, when it's pretty dark, or in the morning, if you coyote howl, you're probably going to get them to answer. The one thing you have to watch is if they're too close to you, or if you're too close to them on the roost, sometimes they won't shock, or they might even shock, but now you've sounded like a coyote that's under their tree and they're going to run off. But if you're, a quarter, half, even 3/4 of a mile away, I'm constantly howling with my coyote howler to try and get them to strike so then I can hear them and move over closer to them. So when you go back to the property you were hunting this morning, I would go set up where you think they're going to be and see how that goes, and see if you hear anything on the limb, and then try and figure out where they're roosting, because then you have an area of where they want to be and where they're roosting, and then a lot of times you can figure out that path in between, and that's where you'll want to be set up. Maybe if you don't get them, when you go back tomorrow, you might be able to figure out, okay, not only do I know where they want to be, I know where they're roosting, and then you can figure out if there's a pinch point or some sort of geographic feature that's going to say, hey, they're going to walk right through here, and look, here's tons of tracks, so they obviously walk right through this area. That might be another place that you can set up on them.
Right.
Yeah, and if they're not fired up right now, and if you're not hearing a lot of gobbling, and you're not hearing, you may actually want to just have some patience and play the long game and just sit and listen and watch and just. I mean, there's been plenty of seasons where I've sat myself and my friends for our personal hunts or with clients. We've sat in the ground blind all day, and you may, like I said, you may sit there for several hours with nothing, be half falling asleep, and then all of a sudden you hear, either a gobbler strutting or you hear something come up and kick your decoy, and you snap awake and you look up and there's two gobblers are right there in your decoy spread beating up on your decoy. So, if they're not fired up and they're not talking a lot, then you may want to just play the long game if you think you're in an area where they want to be.
Yeah, I think I have that to my advantage. Hey, I might lose you guys. I'm starting to lose some service.
All right, Jim, be safe. Keep us posted.
I appreciate your time.
All right.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks, man. Bye.
All right, Chris, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was good. It sounds like I thought he was hunting, but it sounds like he was scouting on one property. But it'll be interesting to see with that little bit of advice if he can get back in there and kind of get set up where he needs to be. It's always fun listening to a question from someone that hasn't done it a lot, because it brings me back to, I still feel that same way every day that I turkey hunt. It's almost like we start over. We gain as much knowledge as we can through experience, and but there's always, where do I need to be? Where are they going? I mean, it still comes back to those basic questions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, can you get in a battle with those hens and call them in a different direction? I have a YouTube video of one of our hunts out here in Kansas, and the birds were going to fly down and head a different direction, and I knew that, and I just laid on the calls, and I just, a couple of the comments, you've heard it, especially with ghouls, you get those guys and gals that hunt in Alabama or Mississippi or, Pennsylvania or whatever, and they're like, golly, you guys are calling way too much and too loud, and you can't call turkeys like that. Well, okay. There are times when, if the birds are going to walk away from you and they're in a big flock, well, guess what? You've got to get the entire flock to either move your way, or you've got to sound good enough to where you can entice at least a couple of those gobblers out to move your direction. But if you can set up where they already want to be, or where they already travel, oh my gosh, yeah, that's your priority. Figuring out where they are going, where they want to be, and get yourself in their path, and your life is a lot easier.
Yeah, guys, I really appreciate you guys tuning in here to the podcast. I've got, obviously, Chris Roe of Roe Hunting Resources. You were just listening to a friend of mine, Jim from Colorado, that was out in Texas. It sounds like he's in Central Texas doing some scouting for a season that starts here April 1st, was going to make a run. I actually caught him in the vehicle. He had texted me while Chris and I were just starting our intro, said he had some turkey questions, and I said, hey, we'll just call and record it, and hopefully you guys get a little value out of that. Chris, it's always great having you on the podcast. It's been a while. What's going on in your world?
No, I appreciate it. I'm always glad when you give me a call. It's fun chatting with you. So, no, my world, brother, is trying to deal with all this new panic issue about COVID-19 and get ready for our turkey season. So the past month has just been for me, it's been a mad scramble to get a bunch of our spring food plots in and established, and then just get everything just lined up for our hunts that start. Well, now our first group just officially asked to postpone their hunt until May. So now I guess my first hunt doesn't start until probably April 7th. So it gives me a little bit of breathing room to get a little bit more stuff done. But I love this time of year, man. You've got to be in the same boat. You've got Mexico hunts coming up, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we're scheduled to start April 18th. Obviously, with this whole coronavirus deal going on, a bunch of my April hunts, a bunch of the guys, said, "What are our choices?" And I said, "Well, you can just bump them back to next year." And that's what a lot of people have done in April. I've still got a few guys that want to go here in April. The border is actually open. They are saying, if you look on, Fox, CNN, you name it, it's saying the border's closed. I have a friend down at the customs. He says it is not closed. U.S. citizens can come and go. And every day that might change. But right now it's open. We're sitting here at the end of March. Our birds don't really get going till that mid-April time frame. And, we were scheduled this year probably for our biggest season of the amount of hunters and the amount of birds scheduled to harvest. Got a bunch of new properties, and I was super excited. Still am excited, but, I've had to juggle a little bit and kind of postpone things, but I'm still hoping our late May and late April and early May to the mid-May mark hunts will be able to take place. The reality is if things don't get better and if things escalate or even stay the same, worst case scenario is we bump back and we postpone everything to next year. The heartburn for me, Chris, like I'm sure you, although you have the opportunity, your farms and such are literally right there by your house. So, I mean, even if for whatever reason no hunters could come, you can probably still go out here and gobble, and do the whole thing. Mine's a little more complicated with the Goulds being in Mexico. And, this would be my 11th season doing our hunts down there. An interesting thing to note is the White Mountain Apache here for Merriam's. I've been doing that hunt a lot with some friends. That hunt has been completely canceled. Both hunts, the San Carlos Indian Reservation canceled both of their turkey hunts as well as their spring bear hunts. The National Forest here in Arizona is still open, but they've closed all the campgrounds. So as of right now, turkey hunting in Arizona, which won't start till the kind of the end of April, is still quote unquote a go. But it would not surprise me if the National Forest, if the federal government steps in and potentially closes the National Forest. I think it would be a shame if they did that. But in other words, everything is up in the air, as I'm sure you are going through as well.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing that just frustrates me. I mean, I don't know if I know I haven't really talked much about it officially, and I don't know how much you've talked about it officially, but I do lean much more libertarian and more, I'm a constitutional conservative, if you will. And the thing is I understand that the difficult position that some of our government officials are in given this time, because let's just face it, there's a lot of stupid people out there. That just aren't practicing common sense. And unfortunately, a lot of those stupid people are creating the situation where some of our government officials want to just shut everything down. So we ended up with our Kansas governor just recently put in place on, I think it starts Monday or Sunday night, midnight or something like that. Anyway, supposedly a stay-at-home order that no one's supposed to go out unless you're going grocery shopping, if you're going to go to get medicine, or if you want to go out and hike and go outdoors. It's like, okay, well, what the heck does that mean? So people can go out and hike and recreate, but you can't go to work. I've got an issue with that, and I've had some conversation with people. I said, in Colorado's kind of in the same boat as well. I think for Kansas, I think our situation is, I think our governor wants to be able to make it known that she's doing things to open the door for the possibility of federal tax dollars, federal aid. But it's one thing for our government officials that keep pulling a paycheck, and they have a nice retirement, and they have their health care and everything paid for and by the taxpayer dollars. It's one thing for them to say, okay, everybody stay home and don't go to work. It's another thing for us private businesses and small businesses to say, okay, well, yeah, how are we going to float that? So it's going to be an interesting situation if they tell us they want us to go, social distance, but by all means go out and enjoy go and enjoy nature. Oh, but by the way, we're also going to shut down all of the places that you can go enjoy nature. I think you're going to see some people starting to revolt, because I'm already starting to see it here in Kansas where people are like, okay, we're being patient, we're being smart, we're trying to do what we can do, but let's not get ridiculous here. So for us, I think the smart thing that's going to help, because you're in a different boat than I am, because you've got the landowner tags that you bought and the logistics of going to Mexico. I have that flexibility here that normally when I book my hunt, I will book through April, but I always kind of leave May. Our season goes from April 1st and through May 31st. I always leave May as a wild card so that I have some flexibility. If people want to come and hunt in May and the birds are doing well, then great. We can come on out and hunt. But I always kind of leave it as a buffer. I think that's going to help us greatly this year, because that first group, again, they're from a state that has a movement order in place. So they just said, well, can we bump it to that first part of May? I'm like, absolutely. If some of our Colorado hunters that were planning on coming out say, hey, we can't come, can we bump it? I've got the flexibility this year to play with it a little bit. But luckily, most of these movement orders so far are such that if you're going to go out into the wilds, so to speak, and enjoy nature, as long as you're, stay 6 feet apart from people and blah, 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 practice, common sense, you're good to go. So I think our hunts are good to go right now. I've looked at everything, Kelly and I've looked at everything. I think we still are good under the movement order to have folks come out and hunt, because we've got a separate place for them to stay. They're going to drive their own vehicles. We can play the whole social distancing thing, but I just fear that we've got some of our politicians playing, making political hay with this whole thing. And I just hope that things settle down quickly and common sense starts to creep back into public policy, and we can just get back to our lives here sooner than later. Otherwise, it's going to get ugly out there.
Yeah, I think economically, I do not have I'm sorry, but I don't have a positive outlook on what's about to happen. I think this is going to be catastrophic in a lot of sense. I think you cannot shut down businesses for this long. They need to really get going here in the next, let's say within 2 weeks, they need to be up and rolling. If they're not, I think we're going to have a lot of issues. We're going to have a lot of issues regardless. But I think, everyone out there listening, there's no need to panic, but you definitely need to kind of start figuring out what the, plan B, C, D, E is in how this all rolls out. It's an unfortunate situation that we're in, because quite honestly, Chris, the economy was never better. Like, it's probably the best U.S. economy that we've ever had. And it's not like the fundamentals were bad. This is completely this is completely just a crazy thing that has happened. And those fundamentals probably, while people are saying remain strong, I think the issue is you basically, I've talked to a lot of people yesterday and this morning that are big time businessmen that have literally had to lay at times half their workforce to 3/4 to all of their workforce completely off. So,
yes, Yeah.
I think there was 3.5 million people for the week that filed for unemployment. It's never that number's never happened. We've never seen
Yeah.
that. So anyway, let's talk turkeys and hope for the best and hope that we can get all of this behind us. We've got a whole series of question and answer here. A bunch of questions come in, so we're just going to hit them one at a time and try and answer them as in depth as we can, and then we'll just move to the next question. So you ready, Chris?
Let's do it, brother.
Okay. All right. Why are gobblers hesitant to come downhill to a call? Well, one of the things, I'll have you weigh in too, but one of the things that I've always thought is why they're hesitant is they have the optical advantage usually when they're above. Just think of yourself standing on a ridge and you're looking down as opposed to looking up. A lot of times when you're above and looking down a ridge line or down a hill, you have optical advantage. So that's one thing that jumps out at me and I've had gobblers come uphill and I've had them come downhill. So I've heard that gobblers typically don't like to come downhill, and I'm sure that that's the case. I think it's a little bit of a wives' tale. I'm really curious what you have to say, Chris. But the one thing I could think from a turkey's perspective is they can kind of stand up high and look down and say, no, you come to me. I'm in a safer spot where I can see better, and I'm not going to come down the hill. You come up to me, and I'll watch you come all the way up the whole way so that everything's safe up here. What do you think?
Yeah, no, you nailed it. I think it does depend on the vegetation in your area. So if you're in open ponderosa pine forest, I can tell you, yeah, I agree. They have the advantage, again, especially a gobbler, especially if he's strutting. The whole point of him strutting is to draw attention to himself and show off for the hen. If the hen wants to breed, the hen will walk up to him. And if she doesn't want to breed and he just wants to show off for the hen, there's plenty of times where you can watch hens out feeding and they might be 80, 100 yards away from the gobbler. He's just got himself in a strategic location where he can keep an eye on him and show off. And if he's in a higher elevation in open terrain, you got it. He's got the optical advantage to sit there and show off and do his thing and let the hen that he's hearing or the turkeys he's hearing come up to him. Or in the situation of actual live birds, if he sees those other turkeys, down at the bottom or down lower elevation and they're just walking away, well, he has the option either he can drop down and join them or he can just parallel them up on the ridge and keep showing off. Now, in situations, and this is from my standpoint, when I hear people talk about elevation, my mind automatically goes to Merriam's, but same thing with you with the Goulds and everything else. If you're in those areas where you're in, say, oak brush, and there's, thick cover covering the mountain and maybe a ponderosa pine and oak brush situation, okay, that might be a little bit of a different story. You might have some birds above you, but if they can't see you, and maybe you're on a little bench in the middle of the slope, and you're set up there, and they're above you, and it's just thick oak brush where they can't look down in, then you absolutely have a good opportunity to call them down to you because you're in a logical place on the map where hens and turkeys might be hanging out. So I've had very good success doing that. But when we were talking about open ponderosa pines, when I was hunting, say, the Front Range of Colorado, where it's just pine trees and then bare leaf litter and maybe grass, you've got to be on the same elevation that they are or above them on the crest of the ridge to have a high level of success. Otherwise, they just strut and they just gobble and they just keep doing their own thing.
Got next question. All things Merriam's. What triggers flock breakups in early spring when hens start nesting?
Spring green up. They're going to follow that snow line. They're going to follow the spring green up. Daylight obviously is the photo period is going to finally start changing the hormones. But what really starts to allow them to break up out of their winter flocks is that spring green up. Once things start, you get the snow melting, there's higher protein forage on the landscape. As that increases, there's more opportunities for hens to go different directions and have high quality food, and they'll just start to break up and head in the direction of where they usually, stage before they go off and nest. So typically it's that snow melt and the spring green up. Is that what you've seen down in Arizona on the White Mountain?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And one of the things, I think we need to cover is what is spring green up and what is the snow line? I mean, what do people look for? And I would say you literally want to go where you drive and the Forest Service road is blocked off and you can't go any further because there's snow drifts. And then you've found the snow line. So, it is exactly what it sounds like. Or find, that you're going to climb in elevation till you finally start seeing patches of snow all over, and you kind of want to be in that range where when you go and look at those snow drifts where the water is melting underneath, if you'll notice, there's actually green sprouts and stuff greening up right there on that. As the snow melts, it's starting to green all around there, but that's what you're looking for, especially in these states that have, high elevation all the way down to transition down to lower elevation. Turkeys will literally follow that snow line.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to leapfrog, because you might find some, patches of snow and some dark timber in lower elevations that all of a sudden you get yourself back in there and you've got some south-facing slopes or southwest-facing slopes that maybe, they've warmed up a little bit more than what some of the thicker timber was. Those birds will walk right over those snow drifts to get to some of these bare patches. So I'm thinking of one place in southwest Colorado where it's not uncommon. So the birds will stay down low in the low oak brush. And then as you start moving up the mountain, there's a band of thicker pines and thicker timber, and the snow just holds a lot longer. But if you can get past that band of snow and start to climb up a little bit higher elevation, you start getting into the big mature ponderosa pines. Well, because they're more open, they have started to thaw out a little bit better, or because it's more open, the wind has kept some of those snow drifts, snow patches a little bit more clear to where those areas open up earlier. So yeah, you're looking, Jay, you nailed it. You're looking for the place where that snow is melting and it's exposing bare ground. The new grasses, the new forbs are coming in, and it's not uncommon to see tracks in and out and around the snow, over drifts in and out of the timber. You'll see tracks in the snow all the time, but they are going to crowd that spring green up line hard.
Yeah, the next question was same guy, curious about mountain Merriams in response to snow following snow line. I think we covered that. We've got, do Merriams, this is from CO Bachman, _Bachman, do Merriams exhibit any patterns in their roosting location? Seems entirely random where they tree up. So Merriam's turkeys exhibiting patterns in their roosting locations. One of the things that I've found is that typical that Merriams have kind of areas, I found where they've winter flocked and they literally roost in the same tree all winter, but it seems like in the spring they end up having kind of a pattern and a rotation where they'll hit a certain facing slope, and it may not be the exact tree, but you can every couple of days, yes, I'll hear a gobbler there, I'll hear a gobble there, and you find these common areas that they do like to roost in. They're not as much, and Chris, I'll let you speak to this in a minute, but the Rios, where you've got river bottom type Rios and some of the stuff in Kansas and Texas where they don't have a lot of choices for roost trees. So they tend to roost in those trees that they have, and that's where they roost, and that's where you see a lot of parts of the country, they do not like you to hunt the roost areas because that's where If the birds get bumped out of there, they may move over 5 miles because the next roost is miles away. So a lot of property owners will say, we're not going to hunt the roost because we want them to always come back at night on the property. When it comes to Merriam's, I've found common places. I've found birds that until they're pressured, they tend to roost, and some will roost in the same tree. But it seems like as pressure increases, they kind of bounce around, and it seems as though year after year for Merriam's, I can find certain ridges and certain pockets that I'm going to say, I always hear a bird there, and yep, there he is gobbling. Maybe a different bird, but they have certain spots that they like to roost. Chris?
Yeah, I don't need to add anything about your Merriams. That's exactly it. I'll just say with Rios, even with us out here, even though we might have a big river bottom that has numerous large big cottonwoods in it, that all of those cottonwoods could be great roost trees, our birds will still, year in, year out, every single year will come back and roost in the exact same trees. Rios do like to have the same roost year after year. Merriam's, you nailed it. They seem to have an area, and they might be in this tree tonight and that tree tomorrow. Or so I've even seen some on a pattern where on night 1 they're on this ridge, night 2 they're across the valley on that ridge, and then night 3 they're down the valley on that ridge, and then day 4 here they are back at night 1 roost spot. They just kind of move around an area. But yeah, I mean, most of the time you're going to find regions that or areas that they typically roost in for Merriam's, whereas Rios, you'll find a tree.
One thing I'd like to add too is in talking about, we can talk about roosting turkeys, but just something that came into my mind is especially guys hunting, big tracts of public ground for Merriam's, whether it be in Arizona or New Mexico or Colorado or Utah or Montana, whatever it might be, in Wyoming. Keep in mind that so I've found where birds roosted. Let's say I made a play on them in the morning and they went the other way, and I tried to, kind of keep tabs on them, and then they just shut up and I never heard them again. And then I'm like, well, I don't have anything else going. So, there was 4 gobblers here this morning. I'm going to set up somewhere close to where they were roosted this morning and hope that I can catch them coming back to the roost. One of the things that that just came to my mind that I'd like to point out, and I've seen it so many times, is you're sitting there and you're like, man, you're looking at your watch, you don't hear anything, and you're like, man, they should be, like, where are they? I've seen it so many times where literally right at last light, here they come and they're on a beeline. You don't even hear them. And then all of a sudden you just catch them and they're running or trotting, just clicking along, and they go right by you, go right up the ridge, and then fly straight across horizontal into the tree. And you're like, I wasn't ready. I sat here for 3 hours and then they just ran by me.
Yes.
I've had the same scenario where you're sitting there and you're like, nah, they're not coming. I should go somewhere else. More times than not, if you did not booger them in the morning, they didn't see you, you didn't call too much where they're like, I'm shutting up, you'll know when it's like, we're out of here. But if it's like, no, they gobbled the whole way and they left and they're just gone, I would literally wait there till dark, till you can't see, because I cannot tell you how many times that I've been sitting, and I like to get there like 2-3 hours before, maybe set some decoys out and get all set up, and you sit there and sit there and sit there, and you periodically call and nothing. I mean, nothing. And then you sit there and you literally are about to get up and you think, I'll just try one more call on my box, and you go, yelp, 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 and just, boom, right there. And it's like, and then here comes the hens, and there they are. And boom, you've got your successful roost, basically set up, and the bird comes right in and you kill them. My point with all of that is you have to be patient when you're trying to predict where they're going to roost and where you're going to set up and waiting on them. But once you commit to waiting on them, you have to commit. You cannot leave 30 minutes early because the best time is usually 15 minutes before fly up because they don't tend to linger a lot right around where they roost, is what I've found. They tend to be somewhere, they linger, and then they make a mad dash for the roost, especially with Merriam's. Chris, what's your impression on that?
Exactly. And the same thing I've seen numerous times for our Rios, and I'm laughing while you're talking about that because I can literally, there is one property that has a habitual roost site, and they do exactly what you say every single time. It's one of our spots that I will set up on limited occasion. If we're down to the last day or two of a last day of a hunt, or we're towards the end of season and it's getting difficult, I will hunt this roost spot, but understanding that, okay, you bust a bird out of there, then I'm just going to, I'll take one bird off the roost there, and then I won't come back to that property. But no, see, out in Kansas, in a lot of Western states, turkey, the daily shooting light is 1/2 hour before sunrise until sunset. Well, I've literally seen where birds are doing exactly what you're saying, Jay. They are out in the field, milling around. He's out there gobbling. They're strutting. The hens are finally starting to come back in, and they're out there 200, 300, 400, 500 yards way out in the middle of nowhere. Linger. Sun, here we go. Sunset. It's getting close. It's getting close to sunset. It's getting close. And then all of a sudden, here they come. They just single file. He's out there strutting, going nuts, but here come those hens, bum, 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 and they just march right in and go right up to the tree. And I'm literally watching my watch going, okay, we've got 1 minute left of shooting light. Is he going to be in range? Otherwise, they're flying up flying up way too late. Right. So you're absolutely right. If you're going to do an evening setup, you need to be set there, and then you nailed it. Don't move. Because the other flip side of that, too, is if we're talking about later in the season and the hens start going off and nesting, you will have gobblers that will come back to the roost early in hopes to catch those last hens and try to get that. Sometimes those gobblers will get back to the roost a little early, and they'll start gobbling just to let everybody know, hey, I'm over here. Let's go. Let's get assembled back up. Where are you? The hens might be off on nest now, but he's getting a little desperate because he's not seeing his ladies every morning, so he comes back to the roost a little bit early. So, yeah, if you're going to set in the evening in and around a roost site, you need to just sit there and wait. Don't try to run and gun. I don't anyway. I don't. I agree with you, brother. Just sit there and wait and just take it all the way to the last ounce of legal shooting light.
You know, my friend Daniel Franco of Burnt Timber Outfitters up in Unit 3C, he always just laughs and just shakes his head because for years I would go up and hunt 3C for turkeys here in Arizona, and he's like, how do you always kill birds in the evening? He goes, I need to see what you're doing. And I'm like, well, the reason that and it's, Dar even laughs. He's like, Jay kills birds in the evening like no other. And I think I kill more birds in the evening than I do the morning. One of the things I will say is there are times when I have a really good roost situation where there's multiple gobblers, there's a lot of action, and they're hot, and they're in a spot where I know that they love to roost. There's times where opening morning or that morning that I'm hunting, if I'm not in exactly the perfect situation, I'll just shut up and let them go. I don't want to disturb them because I know I can come and get in a good position, and I know I can kill them in the evening. And then I'll literally let them go. I won't even make a play on them, and I'll pick up and I'll go to a whole nother spot and try and do my run and gun, mid-morning run and gun. And then 3 o'clock, I'll be right back where I need to be because I feel like, that afternoon when they're coming back to the roost, you can catch them. And I've had so much success killing birds that I've heard in the morning and basically went and set up and waited for them to come back that I will literally not make a play or even call. I might call a little bit, but if I can tell it's not going to happen, I just shut up. I let the whole flock go off, and I just make my plan for the afternoon, and that's how I've been successful. I mean, I've done that in New Mexico, I've done that in Arizona, on Merriam's, and certainly we do it on Gould's. But you have to have a level of patience to not just hammer them where they're going to be like, that was a little too much funkiness. They know that, they know when something's not right, and they'll be like, and then all of a sudden you go and sit in the afternoon and they roost on the next ridge over, and you're like, well, crap, I put too much pressure on them this morning and I pushed them out of here. So that's just something. We'll go to the next question here.
Yeah, no, yeah, you nailed it. You're absolutely right.
I've got a question. Ever worry about scent control while turkey hunting? Chris, you're a biologist. You can answer this better, but turkeys don't have a sense of smell like an elk does, like a deer, like a bear, like a dog, like a cat. They don't have that sense of smell. I believe they do have some sort of sense of smell, but not in the notion of like smell, and they're using that as a defense mechanism. I've heard, is it the olfactory senses, that they actually do have them, but it's not in the sense that we know smell. Chris?
Yeah, correct. I mean, that if the old adage, the old joke is if turkeys had a sense of smell, we'd never kill one. Yeah, you don't have to worry about scent control for turkeys. The only time that I've, considered or heard people talk about scent control when you're turkey hunting is if you're in an area and you want to set up in say a food plot or a particular pasture or whatever, that there's a bunch of whitetails that are also coming out there that want to feed out in that spot while the turkeys are out there. Sometimes I've heard people saying, yeah, we had to go with scent control just to try to help keep the whitetails from not blowing everything else out. But 99.9% of the time, you don't need to worry about it. I mean, heck, for our clients out here, we're spraying down a lot of, you're spraying your pant legs off with, deep woods off and stuff just to keep the mosquitoes and the ticks and everything off. So no, you don't need to worry about it.